I'm John Batchelor with my colleague and co-host and friend Larry Kudlow of CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the weekend. And we welcome Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution, who has a wonderful piece up at Forbes.com I recommend to everyone. 4 solutions for the Republican Party and its quandary about the debate moderators. A very good evening to you, Bill. One way to solve this, of course, is to never do television again, but we'll set that aside. That wasn't one of your prospects.
No.
Given that the campaigns met in a room over the weekend, we had an immediate photo. You know, these days, you don't actually read the news. You are in the news when things happen.
Right.
You have recommendations, and the first begins with someone, at this point, I'm not sure, but I don't think is on the hit parade of where to debate, C-SPAN. How would that work, Bill?
Well, it just crossed my mind that if you want to go on cable news, the most bland, if you want to call it, but the most sort of personality-free moderators are the people who do call-in shows on C-SPAN, Bakersfield, California. Go ahead. They are purposely drilled in them. They're like the people who watch The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. They are told not to get their personality in the way, not to make any comments, just to sit there and soberly do their show. So if you want a sober moderator, let's start with C-SPAN.
That's great. Bill, look, I don't understand this. You got to help me out. The RNC is sort of at war with the candidates.
Right.
But the RNC seems to hold all the cards.
Correct.
Apart from the controlling the temperature in the room of the next debate, what exactly is going to change?
Yeah, that's a really great point, Larry. This is just a vast exercise in futility. Maybe, as Donald Trump would like, you could move the green room temperature down to, 67 degrees, I think he wants. But at the end of the day, the Republicans want 2 things. They want to pick the moderators, and they want to basically have editorial control over the content. They want to know what the questions are going to be, and if not screen them, just be more in control in that process. And Larry, you've worked in television, you work in radio, you know that no independent news organization is going to dare go along with that. So they can vent about that all they want, but at the end of the day, the networks are not going to change. But I think what you have here is the RNC will go along with this probably just because it's for the good of the base, that you send a letter out to the networks at least, expresses a little frustration, a little anger, but the party's got to move on here because, again, this just isn't going to solve anything. And when you think about it, the challenge for the Republican Party is to enunciate its positions clearly. Bashing the media does not do that.
So they want the questions beforehand, like an open book test?
No, I don't think they want it beforehand, but I think what they want is they want a pledge. They want a pledge of no gotcha questions. Well, my goodness, we can sit here all day long and talk about what constitutes a gotcha question. It's like the great argument in politics about an attack ad versus a, quote, comparative ad, if you will. But, again, this is just wheel spinning. News organizations will not go along with this.
Bill, you've got 10 candidates, which, right off the top makes it unwieldy. It's very difficult. On the other hand, they do get their message out. If you don't want 10, then raise the bar for the polls, all right, and cut it to 5, or just arbitrarily have 3 debates instead of 2. I'm not hearing that. I'm not reading that. And I don't know what the heck's going to change.
I think I will say I think that's what's going to happen come January. I think you'll see the bar raised, and let's just say 5% as a random number. And yes, the outside candidates will cry foul about this, but by January, you'll have had the better part of a year to be campaigning, a year to collect money, a year to go on the air, and a year to make your case. And if you can't get up to 5% by then, you're not going anywhere. So I think it makes sense to raise the bar. But you talk about 10 candidates being involved, and I think there were 11 who sat down at the conference, the meeting of the families in Alexandria. But those 11 Republicans, those campaigns all have different interests. Donald Trump wants fewer people on the stage. Ben Carson would love to do this on Facebook because he's a Facebook candidate. Trump would like to have fewer debates whatsoever. So it's you don't have a lot of consensus, and you have candidates like Kasich and Christie who actually like the CNBC debate because it got feisty and it got them some attention. So the party's just not moving forward clearly or in unity on this.
Is the word debate misleading, Bill? Because there's another way of looking at this. Everybody's making statements all evening long, and those statements comport exactly with their stump speeches. So there's actually no contest of wills up there. We know what they're going to say when they start talking.
No, you're right. I mean, the candidates forum is the proper use for this term, but the frustration is this. You've had 3 debates so far, and have we really learned a lot about where the candidates are on the issues? No, we've kind of had the same problem coming out of each debate. We spent a lot of time talking about the media, a lot of time talking about moderators, be it CNBC, be it CNN, even be it Fox News, which is supposedly the home team. And if your Republican Party, which again needs to start clarifying where it is on issues, it's not happening in these forums, and I think that's part of the frustration that you see here.
Bill, how do I read the emergence of Ben Carson as the polling leader? What does that mean? Is that for real? Could he be president? Is it a protest vote? How do I read that?
I think you read it in conjunction with the wallowing of Jeb Bush, and that this is just sort of an exclamation point. Sorry, Jeb Bush, but Ben Carson, I guess, gets an exclamation point, too, as to the power of the non-politician in this cycle. I mean, keep in mind, Larry, that, we've talked about in each and every Republican cycle, it seems, since going back to Reagan, that what's the best message? To be a governor, be outside the Beltway, talk about your experience, show off our programs you've done, skip the message, as my state goes, so should America. And voters, Republican primary voters, are rejecting that message. Look at how the governors are doing in this field right now, be it Jeb, be it Christie, be it Kasich, be it Huckabee, be it Bobby Jindal. The governors are all floundering. Instead, it's a non-politician like Ben Carson who's moving forward. I don't see him being elected president today. I'd be curious as to what you think, but I don't think that voters are going to want to pick a guy. And I think part of the charm here is that people really don't know much about Ben Carson. I mean, they do know he's a neurosurgeon, but I challenge any primary voter to name 3 positions he has, including the flat tax.
The Granite State poll shows us that only 20% of the voters in New Hampshire, who are very critical players to this conversation, have made a decision now, have actually fixed upon a decision. That means 80% of the people are still drifting around, despite the fact that they give an answer to the pollsters. So to say too early is obvious. It might be that we're keeping pollsters employed. They're making a lot of money, but this comes to nothing, Bill. It's just noise while we're waiting for January.
Well, I think we're getting awfully excited in the fall. Look on the Democratic side, where a few weeks ago we would have talked about Hillary Clinton maybe being in trouble on the Democratic side, but facing a real threat from Bernie Sanders. Poll out today shows her ahead in New Hampshire now, and shows her killing him nationally. So you see stabilization on that side, but that's a 2-person race. I'm sorry, Martin O'Malley, you don't really count. So they have only 2 people to choose from. So Republicans still have to figure out a way to win on themselves down to 15. But again, I think that once you get into February and you start voting, the field's going to collapse really quick. And I think you're going to come down to 3 candidates, and one's going to be an outsider, one's going to be from the sort of protest corner of the party, and the third's going to be the more established.
Let's talk about 2 of those candidates. Larry and I were talking off air, Bill. Senator Cruz and Senator Rubio. They're getting a lot of ink. Is it deserved?
Yeah, I think it is, because this falls right in the scenario that I like to talk about. If you view the outsider winning as maybe Trump, maybe Carson, maybe Carly Fiorina, the question is who comes out of the protest sector, and I think that's pretty clear. It's going to be Ted Cruz. He has a very well-organized campaign. He's raised a lot of hard money. He's staked out his turf very well in the South, and he's just very good in these debates and very good at picking his fights. So I think he's a serious contender. Rubio, I welcome Larry's thoughts on this, because I kind of struggle with Rubio right now. There just seems to be this gravitational pull toward Rubio as the guy, as his moment. Now, a lot of that thing's fueled by Jeb Bush, but here's the question, Larry. Is a lot of this drift toward Marco Rubio because he really is generally so great, or is this more reflection on the lack of alternatives in the party?
Well, it's a great question. I'm not sure I can answer that question. I mean, it's an important question. He's done well in these debates, and the debates at the moment are the litmus test, because, as John said, there have been no votes cast. So he's done well. He's very glib. He's a good talker. He just nailed Jeb Bush on this silly editorial about not voting enough in the Senate, which probably nobody cares about. So he's done well. He's performed well. Is it deep? Can he be relied upon? I don't know. And that brings me to this point or question. Every poll, including the Wall Street Journal today, shows the economy number 1 issue. So my question is, with respect to Rubio and Cruz and all of them, is the Republican Party getting a growth message out? And is it affecting middle-class people, who are worried about tuition and health care and so forth?
This was supposed to happen on Tuesday of last week in Boulder, or was it Wednesday, whatever night it was, Thursday, I forget now, it's all blur. But the Boulder debate was supposed to be an economics debate where, in theory, someone like Rubio, or even Jeb, who has a tax plan, could have stepped forward and talked about what he was doing for families, but that failed. They meet on Tuesday the 10th in Milwaukee. Fox Business is holding this one, so in theory we have that talk again. But, again, this is what has me curious thinking about Rubio, Larry, because you go back the last half century of presidential politicians who were all elected in their 40s, and that's John Kennedy, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. And you see some common threads, aside from the fact that they were Democrats. They all played very heavy on aspirational politics. They all, frankly, oversold their campaigns, just suggested things which just in reality could not be done, but people bought into it. They all were quite masterful at speech giving and debating, and also all were very good at mastering modern media. They all kind of showed a transition. So I'm curious as to see whether Rubio, who'll be 45 next year, also has these same sort of core qualities of a 40-something candidate.
Another question on the same topic. All right. Iran deal has kind of died down for the moment, but it's such chaos in the Middle East, it's not going to die down. Right. Who is the candidate best suited to sit across the table from Vladimir Putin? Because I think that whether pollsters ask this or not, I think voters want somebody that can sit across Putin and take his measure instead of him taking our measure.
Now, here's the question for Republicans. Do they make their case saying this candidate X nominee to be decided, is the best person suited to sit across Vladimir Putin, or do they make it a referendum on Hillary Clinton, saying, look at her record as Secretary of State, would you trust her being in charge of foreign policy altogether? I don't know if there's a current candidate in that field of 10 serious people who we would say has foreign policy chops necessarily. Yes, Rubio has been involved in foreign policy as a senator, so has Lindsey Graham and others, but I don't see a candidate defining themselves as the negotiator. But again, you could get elected without that. John Kennedy got away with this. Bill Clinton certainly got away with it. I worked on the Bush campaign in 1992. We tried to beat the crap out of Bill Clinton on the fact that he knew nothing about foreign policy. Voters glossed it over, and the the Clinton campaign very effectively turned it around on George Bush. So I think actually the smart Republican play is to actually make it more of a referendum on Hillary than it is talking on the Republican side.
And Larry, I add that the president was, according to the New York Times report, joking in a sarcastic way about that very same question to a fundraiser within these last days. Something, I paraphrase, that people are sitting around saying Obama's weak, Putin is kicking sand in his face. This is the president's metaphor, not mine. And that the Republicans can take him on. And then he turned it around by saying, how are they going to take on Putin if they can't take on moderators at their debate? It was a joke for fundraising. But I mentioned that it's on the president's mind, Larry. It's on the president's mind. He's posing that question. We have to believe that Mrs. Clinton knows that question is coming, how she's going to do. And the answer is no one knows. But the landscape in the Middle East, and including Iran, Larry, it's deteriorating quickly. I mean, very quickly. We had a report on CNN tonight that suggests that Russian aircraft that came down in the Sinai, which we know wasn't shot down by a missile, Islamic State claims it shot it down, that a U.S. satellite recorded a burst of energy associated with heat before the plane came down. Maybe it was a bomb, maybe it was a comet, I don't know. But Larry, this situation is going to be reckless by the time we come to those October debates, and Mrs. Clinton is not skilled to answer those questions.
Well, I just think her record, as you say, is not a good record. She helped to launch many of the failures of this administration, including the Russian reset, including the Iranian talks, including the Syrian talks.
And the Russians despise her, Larry, for lying to them about Libya.
So I'm waiting. This next debate may not be the debate, but at some point the GOP has got to get its foreign policy chops on the table and criticize Mrs. Clinton or just tell them what they would do differently, because the country is very, very unhappy. I mean, it's unhappy with the economy, but I think it's really unhappy with the demise of American stature overseas.
Last word for you, Bill. Go ahead.
No, I agree, but Larry left one nation out of that, and that's Libya, because if anything has Hillary's fingerprints on it, it's the debacle that's occurred in Libya.
It's what she doesn't want to talk about. And maybe the FBI does. We'll see. Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution, Larry Kudlow, CNBC, and Kudlow Radio on the Weekend. I'm John Batchelor.